button. Hi, welcome to Write More Light. My name is Sarah, and I am out of my mind excited to introduce to you today someone who I've known for a long time in some varied contexts. And well, first let me back up. This is just me proving to my guest how very professional I am. Don't fret, anyone. So today we have an amazing guest who I've known for I'm just going to rewind and say it all again, who I've known for a long time in varied contexts. But today you will be meeting her as a writer and as a pastor. Emily Newton graduated from Iowa State with a degree in religion and sociology in 2012. In 2017, she graduated Luther Seminary with her Master's of Divinity. She's currently a pastor at Cambridge Lutheran Church in Cambridge, Minnesota. Her favorite writing influences are stand-up comedians and poets. Emily currently lives in Blaine, Minnesota with her husband, Kimball. So we're gonna have a dope conversation about the intersection of all these things with Emily. Following that, we will do some updates on the Midwest Writing Center and our writing prompt. So of course, if you're following along with us, ask questions, engage with us, let us know how you're feeling about writing. I don't really, you don't need to tell us your personal business, but how you're feeling about writing, about the content of the show. We love to be engaged. Emily, thank you a bajillion and a half times for hanging out with me today.
I think I figured it out, and we've known each other since the 6th grade.
We don't need to do that now.
That feels like a long time ago.
It does. And it's funny, right? Because I feel like any friend made then is like a very specific context. But like, I think that we grew up in really parallel ways. And I feel like every time we've reconnected has been, well, for me, really exciting. And there's a better word than exciting. It's been, I don't know, like revelatory. Like you get cooler all the time.
Oh my gosh. Do you see the blush on?
This is the Flatter Emily show.
Tune in next week.
Oh yeah, anytime. I got you. Okay, I can get into the meat and potatoes. So you started out, as I understand it, I guess you probably knew you studied in undergrad religion and sociology. But as I understand it, you saw yourself as a writer first. Is that right?
Yeah. So when I was in high school, maybe, I was actually on a mission trip, and one of the nights of that mission trip, they had like a talent show. And I was like, this is like kind of not embarrassing, but whatever. It's like I'd always, like, my talent for talent shows had always been dance, because I danced since I was 7. And so this year I was like, my dance partner's not here this year. It's just me. I'm gonna do something different. And so I had written this poem, and I was like, well, it's about Jesus. It'll be appreciated here. And so I kind of performed it, and the leaders of our group were like, like performance poetry is a thing, right? And I said, no, I didn't. And so I immediately went home, and I watched hours upon hours of slam poetry. I mean, like up until 3 a.m. watching this down the rabbit hole of slam poetry.
Oh, my parents would not let me use the internet that late at night.
I'm not sure they knew. In fact, this might be a little revelatory for them. And so like kind of from there, I was like, oh, I really enjoy doing this. And right. And weirder than that is that, like, not only do I enjoy doing this, but it seems that people receive it well. And so not that people need to receive anything well for you to do what you want to do, like you do you. But there seemed to be an outlet for things. And I've kind of always been pretty good at using metaphor. And since that's what a lot of poetry is, that tended to work pretty well. And people would say that kind of like I was speaking to their feelings. And so anytime I can give people language for something that they don't know language for already, I would consider that a win. So yeah, I think I came in, a writer, I would say, to answer your question.
Well, that's great. Did you, so this is a question I ask everyone really. When did you
Yeah.
start thinking of yourself as a writer? That seems pretty young.
Oh, um, gosh, probably college. Probably, I did community college first because it's cheaper. And I remember having a teacher there who was just really supportive and was really like, hey, this is a lifelong thing. This isn't just like, oh, writing in my journal.
Was that in the
And
classroom?
so, yeah, it was at Scott Community.
Who was the teacher?
Trudell, Sue.
I don't know this person, but I bet someone
Oh,
does.
yeah, she's fantastic. I loved her. I don't know if she's still there, but she's fantastic. And she was one of those teachers who, like, you would turn in papers and she's like, hey, like, there's something here. And so I just remember just like, you can only be affirmed so many times before you're like, okay, maybe not everybody's lying about my abilities. And so it tends to a little bit break the barriers of the imposter syndrome every once in a while.
Love that. That's a
Yeah.
really, I mean, everyone has a different story for how they came to see themselves as a
Yeah.
writer, but I really particularly love when there was a push from an authority figure, right? That's
Yeah.
so special. And it's something you don't, it's not uncommon, but it's never like the dominant story
Hmm.
you get from writers. I know. Oh, I wonder if his book is still next to me. It is. Let's go off topic. Chuy Renteria has dedicated his
Hmm.
book to two English teachers he had in high school for the same reason.
Yeah.
And and I like him. But that's the last time I heard that that I was given this push to write by a teacher. And I ask
Yeah.
everyone when, I mean, not like in life, but when I have them on the show,
Stop them in the street. Who told you?
are you a writer? Because I mean, there's a lot of identity that goes into calling yourself a thing.
Yeah.
So I think that it's always worth asking artists, how did you
And I
start?
think it was really funny. There's one time I actually kind of got like almost to the point where like I was accused of being a writer. And I think that was like the moment I felt the most proud because I was like, yeah. Because like someone said like they asked me for a pen and I was like, I don't have a pen on me. They're like, aren't you a writer? Shouldn't you always have a pen? I'm like, oh my God, so now I'm a writer and I'm unprepared. Like this is terrible. So yeah, I was just like, well,
No,
I
I'm a
guess that
writer
means
and I'm unprepared. I want to
right. I
title my book that. I don't know.
right. But now I always have a pen, so it's fine.
Lesson learned. I'm a writer. Always carry a pen.
And I have a
Always
pen.
carry a towel. Um, that's so
Exactly.
awesome. I love that you use the word accuse. I use that word too. And people are sometimes scandalized by it, but I think it's really fun.
It
Okay.
is what it is.
So the other part, and this, we'll make this join like a beautiful jigsaw puzzle in a moment.
Yeah.
But how did you decide to enter seminary?
Yeah. So actually, I actually walked into my first day at Scott Community College. Like I was either going to be a graphic artist or a cop. Those are my two options. So I went with plan C. So no, I walked into my first day of college like, okay, these are my career paths. I had to pick one. So that's kind of the nice thing about community college though, is like gives you lots of room to like figure that stuff out before you're spending so much more money. And so I walked into my first class was actually world religions, and I know, but that's a whole different conversation. But I walked into there, and we had like been gotten an email ahead of time that was like bring something that you would save in a fire, and of course like 90% of the students in the group, it's like really stereotypical, like this is my great great grandmother's necklace, or all the people who would save their pets. Like, good. I love how one person said they'd save their family. Good job. Like,
I
you're better than
mean,
us.
those aren't things.
They're not things, but they got to feel like winners, so it's fine. Um, but there's this one guy who was sitting in the front, and the only reason he was sitting in the front corner is because he arrived late. And he walked into class, and he's just like, and you have to understand that 18-year-old Emily was 17-year-old Emily was a pretty self-righteous person and a little judgmental. She we don't know her anymore. It's fine. But
We don't
like
know
this guy
her.
walked into this guy walked into class, and I was like he's like dressed in like this like really dingy clothes, and like he just looked really rough, and he definitely like got the vibes of like this guy's gonna show up for exams, maybe. Like we're
Mm.
not really sure. Like again, different person now. I'm sure he is too. So he sat down in his seat, and when he turned to slip his cigarettes back into his backpack, he noticed he was missing half an arm. And I was like, "Oh, this dude has a story." And so we sneak all the way through the classroom, and we get up to him, and everyone in the class, the teacher's like, "Well, what did you bring?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, 1 second." And he reaches into his bag and he brings out a Bible. And it's got like post-it notes in it. It's got what do you call it, dog ear, like the earmarked corners. Um, like it's used. And I was just like, the entire class was just like, "Oh, we did not expect that." And he told us a story about how like he was going through recovery, and how in his life there have been a lot of like unfortunate circumstances that were beyond his control, and he did the best he knew how in those circumstances. But it led to a life that he really didn't wasn't proud of anymore. And so when he went through kind of his addiction recovery, a lot of those friends in his life were no longer interested in being in his life. They weren't interested in this new life. And so he found himself attending the church that the AA group was at, because someone invited him to go to church. And that church group became his support system, his new network, his like people who are supporting him in his recovery process. And I had been a Christian my entire life, like baptized, confirmed, all that jazz. And so I really didn't have a lot of exposure to people who had come to Jesus, you know. And so hearing this person's story and being like, this is the difference this makes. Like there was just this like, I need to be a part of that introduction. I would need to be a part of that conversation. And so it was actually my 18th birthday that day, I think. And I told my parents like that night at dinner, I'm like, I think I'm going to be a pastor.
Oh my God, what a beautiful gift for your birthday.
Right? My sister started laughing. Like my dad was like, yeah, okay. And then my mom was just like, oh, okay. And then it's so funny because like, I would tell other people, I waited a little while because like it seemed like a very pompous thing to me to be like, I'm gonna be a pastor.
Well,
Like
it's
like
probably one of those things that feels like too personal to share. I mean, I don't know. I've never decided to become a pastor, but like when I got my this is so bad. I'm sorry I'm comparing your vocation to this. But when I got my cat, I didn't want to put him on the internet. Uh
I mean, well,
I was
my
like,
biggest
this
thing
is my special thing.
my biggest thing is I didn't want someone to be like, really? You? As in like who do you think you are kind of thing. Like I didn't want the first thing for them to notice was like the audacity, you know what I mean? And so I was kind of hesitant to say anything because I just didn't want anybody to be like and so I remember telling that my piano teacher, who also went to our church, I known her forever, and she was like, yeah, that makes sense. She's like, I've known this for like years.
Yes.
She's like, and so like, I'm actually the 17th person from my home church to go to seminary. And she has seen quite a few of the other ones. And she was like, yep, I knew Erica was supposed to before she went. I knew Travis, I knew Dan, like before they went. She was like, I just know these things. And I was like, well, you could have told me. And she's like, you wouldn't have believed me. I was like, good point. I would not have. So, I mean, so that's kind of and it's so funny because when
every
you're
piece
along
of
the
that.
when you're on the seminary track, you get asked that question like a lot. So you develop kind of like your elevator speech version, you develop your 12-page printed version, and that was my in between. So there you go.
That's so beautiful. I was gonna say, anytime I've had a big revelation like that, both of my parents would be like, cool. But my dad is always like, I know.
Yeah.
But I've had this, maybe I hope this surprises you. It probably will. But I've had this thing happen a lot where people are like reluctant to reveal their religion to me. Not their religion, like their faith, that they have great faith. And I feel like you were going through the opposite, like you were, or the mirror side of that, where it's difficult to reveal your faith, which is interesting. I'm really sad about that. I feel like I must come off as way more judgmental than I am.
And I mean,
I
I think it probably has it's
throat clearing when I say that.
no, it's not COVID, I swear. But no, I think a lot of it comes from though, like, especially when you talk about like the more creative art side of the world. And I mean, especially like the millennial art scene, if you want to call it that. Like there seems to be this idea that like how do I say this?
We have like
please,
we have boxes that we put people in,
yeah,
and
we
you're
have
either
boxes.
if you're in this box, you can't be in this box.
Well, I think there's like also this idea that like, okay, but to be in this group, this means like you're an intellectual, and there's this idea that you can't be both an intellectual and someone of faith at the same time.
Probably tell like all the old philosophers that.
Well, yeah, well, they died, so how'd that work for
They
them?
died.
So, so like
Didn't work out for them.
Just saying, they're dead. But it's just it. So I mean, I get that, and I mean, I experienced that as well. I mean, so Kimball works in the IT world, and he had a job in Minneapolis, and a lot of his coworkers, you know, millennial, creative, some members of like the LGBTQ community, and reluctant really to talk about my job, either because one, they don't know how, or two, because they've probably been burned in some way in their life. And believe me, I am so sorry. Like I am a full believer that the church has a lot of apologies to make and a lot of changes to make. But it just saddens me that like it's just completely shut down. And I know that it's not their responsibility to make me feel better about what I do, but it does kind of make me feel sad that we've created these boxes that I don't think necessarily need to be there.
Yeah, well, we're here to talk about art.
Oh, that's right. Dang it, not social
I was
justice.
thinking,
Fine.
I know, there's, I'm gonna get in trouble with myself for saying this. But we've all maybe run into the kind of people who, call themselves Christian and put out a lot of hate. And I can see it being very difficult to separate those two things if that's all you've experienced.
Yeah, absolutely.
But maybe that's our segue, because good art can connect us all. So let's go back a little bit. To performance poetry. Did you ever engage with performance poetry on the performance side, or just
and this is okay. So
the laughter is a great sign. I'm ready.
I know. I'm trying to figure out like how much I should hedge my answer, because like as like a middle class white girl from Iowa, like how much angst can I possibly have, right? And I feel like a lot of poetry is about like how like well, I'm gonna get there. This is part of the hedge. Let me finish my hedge. So, but also I believe that every person's like experience and struggles are valid. So, juggling both of those things. But usually when you see slam poetry and stuff on the internet, it's all about like, I was treated unfairly because of these things. And it's like, absolutely. Let me tell you about why the barista messed up my coffee order though. Like, it's hard to balance those two things.
Well,
but okay, so
let's go, keep going. I've got a lot of thoughts.
Okay. So I participated in a couple of slam poetry competitions when I was at Iowa State. So in the very, very hipster Ames art scene. I participated in a couple of slam poetry competitions. I took quite a few open mic nights. Never really got any farther than it, though. There was one in Des Moines that I kept telling myself I was going to go to, but then I kept talking myself out of it. But yeah, so in that way I did. I kind of dipped my toe in the water, but then I kind of more focused on just the actual like written side of things after those 2 years.
Which is valid. My things I kept trying to interrupt you with were like, you don't,
Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely like if you just do an internet search for spoken word, like you're gonna, or slam poetry, you're going to come up with some intense stuff.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have
Right.
to be angsty.
No.
But also some of my favorites are the ones that are about the barista messing up my order because they're funny, and that's an element
Yeah.
of spoken word that I feel like gets really buried. There are people, it's always, I mean, all art is deeply personal, even when it's not. There's a topic that is rich. But you know, we see the intense stuff before we see the fun stuff, the stuff with the levity that, you know, if you're doing something light or with levity, it's going to be, you know, overshadowed by the really intense emotional stuff. There is that.
I once got second place at a slam poetry competition, and the girl who got first place, all she did for her poem was describe different types of nuts. So I'm just saying, there's all kinds of stuff out there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm interested in that poem now.
There was a Venn diagram. It was a handout. It was awesome.
Shut up.
I know.
All right, she sounds pretty cool. Fine. Okay, so I'm guessing, since someone has accused you of being a writer, that when you started on this journey toward I don't know, distributing faith. So that's what I'm gonna call sermons now.
Sure.
The distribution of faith. That's
I like it.
like, oh, this must be easy for you. You're a writer. Did that ever happen?
Yeah. Well, okay. So you also have to understand. Okay, so I've found that one of the reasons I think like preaching specifically, it comes. I want to say easy because there's really hard parts of it, but like the actual act of getting up there and preaching has, I think, twice in my life stressed me out. And I think that's because a lot of my life has like been coming up to this point.
Right,
Like, I started
you were a pianist, you were a performance poet.
I started public speaking when I was 12.
You started doing what?
I started public speaking when I was 12.
Nice.
Like when I was 12 years old, I was giving a speech in front of like 250, 300 people. So I mean, for my dad is a Mason, and had like a Masonic event. And so yeah, so that kind of like anxiety and stress, I don't remember really ever affecting me a whole lot. And then there's like the writing side where I really enjoy writing. But to write to be read and to write to be heard are two very different things. And so even like today, like even I would say was it 3-4 weeks ago, I gave a sermon where I was like, that was something that was supposed to be read, I think, maybe not so much heard. So I mean, it still happens. But yeah, have been times where people are like, oh, well, this must come really easy for you since, you know, like you're a writer. And it's like, yes. And there's a kind of relationality to preaching that has nothing to do with being a writer. And so, like this past Sunday, my sermon was mostly about empathy and the importance of being an empathetic person over just being a sympathetic person or someone who shows people pity. And I was realizing as I was writing, and I was like, well, empathy is the cornerstone of preaching, to be really honest. I mean, you have to be able to understand and put yourself in other people's shoes to hear other people's needs, real, felt, or perceived, to be able then to speak into them. And so, yeah, you can be, I mean, I've met great writers who their preaching presence isn't that great. But I've also met people who like their writing is all right, but man, they could talk about mac and cheese for half an hour. And I'd be like, but tell me more though. Like, I mean, so it doesn't all like, rely on one or the other, I think, but they just tend to help.
Yeah. Oh God, you made a lot of good points and I didn't write them down. Normally,
isn't this a writing thing?
normally, well, I take notes so that I can get back to,
Yeah.
so I think it's really sad, and something we do at the Midwest Writing Center with our interns is teach them to perform their work,
Hmm.
because if we look back on the history of literature, it started out oral, right?
Hmm.
Um, and then we developed this like starving artist idea of the writer alone in a dim studio apartment, like smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee and writing alone in a typewriter and
Yeah.
never seeing another human. And I think that that's a really toxic ideal, stereotype, whatever it is. Maybe
Yeah.
we don't idolize that, but it exists in our cultural imagination.
Yeah.
Um, and now, with the entire planet at our fingertips, or at least virtually the entire planet at our fingertips, um, it's a lot harder to access an audience in some ways. I mean,
Hmm.
also, of course, in some ways it's easier. And one way of engaging with others through your work is through performing.
Hmm.
So it makes me really sad, how many excellent writers exist who don't hear literally their own words.
Hmm.
Um, Not to be, excluding folks who don't hear things, but
Right.
we are talking about spoken and heard in this
Yeah.
context. And that's something really interesting. Words on a page um, are different from words spoken,
Yep.
and and you're right. Like really great speeches are really great read. Um, but some really great writing is nothing out loud, and some really great speaking looks clumsy on paper. uh,
Hmm.
i I joke a lot, mostly because I've gotten this criticism a lot, um, that the reason, so like my dad for example will say, aren't you supposed to be a writer? You're not, like, when I'm talking and I'm being unclear when
Hmm.
I'm talking, and I'm like, yeah, I can process that. I have time to think through the words then. Now I'm not
Yeah.
clear because I don't know how to talk. Um,
There isn't a backspace in my brain.
right. Um, and you use different parts of your brain when you physically write
Hmm.
something versus when you're speaking.
Yeah.
So lots of things are going on there, but the intersection, of course, with creative writing and, well, I want to back up for a second. One of my favorite kinds of writing to collect, to read, like, but to
Hmm.
collect as anthologies or whatever. Do I have any near me? No, the only one I have near me is Martin Luther King. Um, but I have tons of books of great speeches, which, I mean, epistolaries are already my favorite. Epistolaries include diaries and letters,
Hmm.
but all speeches, all sermons are direct address. They are written
Hmm.
to an audience. Um, and having an audience in mind, or at least knowing that your words will be heard, changes the way you write.
Yep.
Um, Even if you're not writing to an audience, you just are aware an audience exists. Like, say, when you're
Hmm.
preparing for a spoken word competition, there's an
Hmm.
audience. You may or may not know the demographic of that audience. It's going to be different from the
Hmm.
one in your church.
Yeah.
Um, that that changes things quite a bit. And I will say, something I really liked that you said is about the difference between somebody who may be an amazing speaker, but the same words don't necessarily translate to text.
Hmm.
Um, how do you, I mean, that's really beautiful and important point, because I think a great speaker is, I don't want to say underappreciated, but like underappreciated in the context of creative creation,
Yeah.
creative creation, as
Yep.
opposed to
Creative
utility
creation.
creation. Uh,
Manufactured creation. Yeah. Okay.
yeah, no, there's different kinds of creation.
Yep.
Um, and so, when you think about writing so it was a really long way to get to this question. When you think about writing for yourself versus for a sermon, for a speech, um,
Hmm.
do you think about it differently, like when you sit down to do it, or not? Like, does it all come from the same place to begin with? For example, no matter what I'm writing, I have like one paragraph to one page of warming up every time.
So I mean, I guess I had to confess, I really don't write for myself a whole lot. In fact, I legit just started journaling like 3 days ago. I know.
Journaling is really, really good for you, like both
It is.
psychologically and as a writer.
Yeah, no, I understand. In fact, it's so funny. They have all these like notebooks that have like writing prompts in them, and I see them, and I just go, that oh, that sounds daunting, and I just put it back on the shelf. So maybe I need the writing prompt part of the video. I don't know. Um, but I think there are times when so okay, so I write sermons. I mean, I also we do, like inspirational email type things. I also have like a semi daily devotional that I write and I send out via email. And so when I'm writing those things, a lot of the times, um, I mean, I know for most part who's going to be at church, and I can see the list of people who are subscribed to the email. I might not know them all, but I know most of them. And so sometimes it's even like I'm thinking of a very specific face when I'm writing, whether it's a sermon or one of the devotionals, because it's like, man, I bet this person, I can just kind of see them going, oh yeah, like every once in a while if I'm thinking of something to write. But I would say that happens more so with my preaching than the devos. The devos sometimes devotionals. Um, a lot of the times,
Actually,
you're
can
writing.
you tell us what a devotional is?
Yeah, absolutely. So a devotional has kind of a broad definition. It's kind of just one of those like churchy faith kind of words. Um, I guess there's other definitions too, but what I'm talking about specifically is it's a time where you're reading. Um, Mine has scripture, a thought, a question, and a prayer. And so the idea is that it's something that you can read sometimes morning, lunch, whenever, that kind of just like recenters you in your day. It's usually based on some sort of scripture of whatever belief system you subscribe to. I know it's not just Christians who have devotionals, but the idea is that it's a practice, it's a habit that you do on a daily basis. So, and usually it speaks to some sort of felt need in your life.
I didn't know that. I'm glad I
I,
asked.
yeah. Oh, thank you for asking. Sometimes I forget what words because I live in this, so I forget what words. Um, Everyone knows what ones would be new. Um, when I'm writing those ones, though, a lot of times what's actually happening, maybe this is kind of writing for myself. I'm just publicizing it. But sometimes it is kind of more of a, okay, but what am I getting out of this piece of scripture today? What am I feeling about this? Like I pick a theme for every month, and actually I've picked out every single verse through 2022 already for every day. And so I'm picking out themes that I'm like, you know what? When it comes to be September, a lot of times people are like, oh man, summer's over. I got to do this whole life thing all over again. Like it's going to get cold soon. And so, well, I think I would need to hear about like re-energizing, or I would need to hear about like looking for new life in something that seems monotonous. And so we might do that theme for that month. So sometimes it just has to do with what do I experience as a perceived or felt need in the world. I think I might have answered your question and all of that.
Yeah. I got lost on what my question was for a minute because I had to sidetrack you.
It's okay.
I have a list of questions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I mean, you said too when you're working on your devos. Uh, I'm cool. I know the jargon. That you hadn't thought about. Maybe it was writing for you.
Yeah.
I'm impressed that you prepare that far in advance. Not because like that's a weird thing to do, but because dear followers, if you are my friend and you have a thing, I'll subscribe to it. So I subscribe to yours. And they feel very present, right?
Well, I don't write them very far in advance. I just pick the scriptures
Right. But I mean,
far in
well,
advance.
I don't know the Bible at all. So so that might be part of my issue. But they I suppose anything that you're looking at with fresh eyes will have a fresh meaning. So maybe I just didn't think very hard about it.
Well, and that's one of the challenges too, is that, the Bible, pretty old, right? It's been around for a bit. A lot of people have read it. I mean, even people who don't go to church know like the premise of Noah's Ark, right? Kind of have a general
The Bible's pretty old for a long
Yeah.
time.
I mean, but like there's a lot of it that's, people already they've known their whole life. I mean, that was one of the issues I had when my first year of preaching as a pastor. I was like, how do I, it's like snot-nosed 27-year-old, tell this entire room of like 70 plus people like a story they've heard 100 times in a way that they get something new out of it. Like, I mean, trying to preach on like, hey, the birth of Jesus, when it's like, yeah, no, if you're 70, you've heard this 70 times, like how do you bring something new into the story that's been said so flipping often? And so that's one of the things that I try to do in the Devo, because I know there's quite a few people who subscribe who would not otherwise probably make it to church on a Sunday. There are people who were just like, this is going to be my attempt. And like, I'm not adding you.
No,
but,
no. Your audience, I'm making faces at this because it's me. I don't go to church.
But I want it to be accessible. And even like, and I want it to exist so that even if this is the only, like, even if you never have to crack open the Bible and the only scripture you read is actually on the screen because I send it to you, like, I still want you to kind of get the general gist and the understanding of what faith is there for, and that it's there for you. And so, like, that's what I'm kind of trying to do in about like, 4 or 5 inches of text.
Yeah, I like
honestly my regular basis. Sorry,
I've read it in the bathroom at work before.
I mean, it was so funny when I was first like dreaming up this idea of doing this. Like the literal action I was thinking of is, okay, like you're laying in bed, you're reaching over, you're grabbing your phone, you're scrolling through your emails, you're like, oh right, the devotional, you're clicking on it and you're reading it like this.
I think
like squinty eyes, like barely awake.
Either when I signed up for it or when you started, I must have been because most of my memories of reading it are on my phone in the bathroom stall at Barnes and Noble.
You know what? That's beautiful. And I'm just glad you're fitting it in somewhere, both healthy bathroom habits and your devotionals.
Healthy bathroom
Good job.
Important. So how do you do
it's all
it?
a balance.
How do you make healthy bathroom habits? No,
I don't think I'm the professional for that.
I thought you would appreciate the Barnes and Noble bit though.
I do though.
But how do you think of a fresh way to talk about Easter or Christmas or all of the things that I can think of are related to those two holidays? So
and there are the big ones.
I was gonna say Advent or Lent. No, that's the same.
Those
you're still doing
too. Those are great. So I mean, one of the ways, and I definitely don't want to call anything about the pandemic a blessing because it's been terrible and it's been like a heartache and a trauma for all of us collectively. But one of the things that the pandemic has done, though, is one, it gives us a new lens to talk about a lot of these things. You see a lot of people throughout the world talking about, okay, what does life look like when it's down to the bare bones? Because that's what we have right now. And then it's like it's taking that idea and then from a preaching standpoint saying, okay, well, what does scripture tell us? Like, what do we know about Jesus? And Jesus didn't have a lot. And excuse me, like even through that, he was still able to make great impact on the world. And so, what can we learn that way? And I just think of I think of the mom who it's 7:30 in the morning and her kids are watching cartoons, but they're also kind of eating breakfast, but they're really not eating their breakfast. And she's scrambling around to get ready. Like maybe her partner's also doing the same kind of thing. They're dividing and conquering what's their day going to look like. Oh my gosh, school pictures are tomorrow. Can we get a check for that? Also, this bill is due. And I work late tonight, but there's a PTA meeting, but I will see you at 8. Okay, how do we reach those people who are already so maxed out to the fact that like no planner system in the world is probably going to help them a whole lot? Like, how do we reach into their lives? What are their felt needs? And how do we use this book that was written 2,000 years ago to enter into their kitchen in that moment? And so I just think of, that's what I say when I think of like certain people and their faces. I think of their situations, and how do we enter into those moments that, they don't tell that story in the Bible, but the Bible still for them in that moment. Does that make sense?
I mean, you didn't tell me how you do it, but yeah,
So I use
you
the
told me
computer.
how
No, I'm
you
just
thought
kidding.
about it, and I'm sure that that is the same thing. Like,
Yeah. Well, I mean, and also, I mean, sometimes it's just, I mean, I don't want to sound corny, but also, I mean, this is part of my experience, is that like sometimes it's just about me getting out of the way. Like, I mean, there have been times when, don't tell my boss, but I've written my Sunday sermon at 4 a.m. on Sunday.
this is online.
I know. Well, it's fine. I think he's
I'm
out to lunch.
I'm sure
Um,
I'm sure that he has too.
yeah, that's probably true. And so, but there's just time, and there's this joke that like, because we pastors, we have jokes, where like,
What
the Holy
up?
Spirit, like, the Holy Spirit gives you what you need. And I used to say, like, yeah, for some reason I'm at the end of the route. And like, like Holy Spirit doesn't stop by till like Sunday morning, and it's frustrating, but I'll take what I can get. Um, and so sometimes it's just about you getting out of the way and creating space for, like whatever you want to call it. But in my context, in my life, it's the Holy Spirit to work in and amongst those things, to come up with the words when you can't.
That's really beautiful. It also it's pretty great. What everything you've said seems to come back to empathy is the cornerstone of preaching.
Hmm.
And that's really beautiful. I put that in the comments. I didn't just remember it.
Oh,
I thought it was an important thing that you said, so I wrote it down. Um, and that's interesting. You're talking about you don't have unless you hid them from me. You don't have children,
I don't.
and you are not, going about your morning in a hurry trying to, feed 7 mouths and
No,
pay
just
the
one.
picture day, pay for picture day or whatever. But
Yeah.
you're still, you're doing this work of putting yourself in the shoes of probably everyone who you may potentially be reaching.
Hmm.
And that's probably, the more important, more subtle, maybe it's not subtle, um, intersection for me between
Hmm.
speeches and sermons, because I would always say they're the same thing, if you asked me, because they're both things that I read so often. I said I collect famous speeches or whatever, and I've got
Hmm.
2 books of MLK sermons on this shelf next to me. I also have speeches from, or love, I've got, not love, but yes, love. I have love letters from famous people, because I think letters
Hmm.
too are the same. I think that direct address is direct address, and I don't really believe in genre. Which is why someone giving a speech about, say, war, is in the same genre for
The
me.
genre that you don't believe in.
Right. Um, I had this wonderful, wonderful poet, Emily Kingery. She's a professor, come on and argue with me about whether or not genre exists. And it was so much fun. She on the side of genre.
Right, sure.
um, but that's why, a sermon about Christmas is in the same category to me as a speech about why it's wartime.
Hmm.
We're doing some kind of exercise. Oh, I'm coming to a revelation here. Get ready. I think all writing, unless it is solely for self, is an exercise in empathy, right?
Hmm.
Wow.
Always, why do it?
I know I've said things along these lines before, like that actors and writers who write fiction, um, actors who perform anything, and writers who write fiction are performing an act of empathy,
Hmm.
or practice of empathy. We're trying to get inside the minds of someone else. Um, but then with, say, speeches or sermons, and please correct me because I'm like really waxing philosophical over here and being very self-serving. is to do that practice of empathy in a way that comforts and stimulates.
Hmm.
I feel so
Well,
sorry.
and I think it's the fact that, like when you're preaching or speaking or, slamming or whatever you're doing, like to know that like attached to the ears of the person who's hearing you, there's an entire person, there's a body, right? There's um they're carrying their baggage with them. And so in order for them to hear you, like you have to reach in to those experiences, to the empathy, to the trauma, to the pain, to whatever it is. Because I mean, we've all done it, right? Where we've all been either been watching a show or we're we're at a performance, or maybe you're sitting in the pews at church or whatever you're doing, and you leave and you're like, I don't know a single thing they just said because I've been so wrapped up in my own stuff. And that happens. That's fine. It's like whatever. Um, but like that's why I think it's really important to reach into it, because you're going to be thinking about it whether I talk about it or not. So let's at least think about it together.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. Do you have any, I'm skipping around here because we're getting low on time. Do you have any advice to folks who want to write to an audience?
Oh gosh. You have to create your own audience most of the time. Like you're not going to just like stumble onto an open mic nightstand just because you feel like it. Or I mean, you're not going to find yourself there accidentally. You have to be intentional. If that's what you want to do, then you have to do it. I think a lot of people are waiting for an invitation to call themselves a writer. They're waiting for an invitation to perform. And sometimes the person who has to believe in you first is you. I mean, my dad, I remember when I ran for like student council president. I think, oh God, when was it? It was elementary school. I don't know why we had a bureaucracy in elementary school, but whatever. No power, but whatever. And I remember talking to my dad, and this is like, I don't know if this is like Midwest nice or what this is, but I was like, well, I can't vote for myself. That's like, you can't do, ew. And my dad's like, well, if you don't think you can do it, why are you running? And I was like, oh, dang, all right, that's a good advice for a
I've had the same
10-year-old.
sensation. I love that because like, yeah, there's no reason to not vote for yourself, but I have that
Right.
weird compulsion too. When I too ran for student council in elementary school.
Yeah. Revisit the school system. But anyway, but yeah, so I mean, it's kind of the same thing of like, okay, if you don't think you can do it, or if sometimes you have to be the first one who believes in yourself, because otherwise, why would anybody listen?
I
And I know
say
that sounds harsh,
all the
but like
time
that's
to anyone who will listen, I say, if you don't call yourself a writer, no one will. Which
yep.
you don't have to believe in yourself. Shoot,
Hmm.
fake it till you make it. Call yourself a writer if that's
Yeah.
what you want to be called.
Yeah. I once called one of my friends a comedian, and she was like, well, I mean, I just do improv. And I was like, okay, but you're also funny, like
Right.
this in the world.
Are you
So
making comedy?
I think you get to be a comedian. And it's just so funny, like these things that we're so hesitant to like give
Own.
ourselves these label and own these skills. And I mean, and I've talked about this too a number of times, where it's like, okay, but you have these gifts, it's kind of irresponsible not
Ooh, I
to
like that.
claim them.
Irresponsible
And
not to claim them.
because I mean, if you're like, sometimes I think and you can decide that this is like thinking super highly of yourself, but sometimes it's the motivational push that people need to remember that they have value and worth. But like there's something right now inside your brain that you've thought about writing that you haven't written, that someone needs to read or hear. Like someone out there needs your words because they don't have them. And I think it's our responsibility as people who have words to use them and to, what did you say, distribute them to others. I mean, I mean, I don't want to like I don't want to quote Uncle Ben, but like with great power comes great responsibility. So
I mean,
so
I think first, you've given me all sorts of profound profundity. Is that a word?
Fundity. I love it. It is now. It's on the
It's a
internet.
word. Anyway, I really want to just shove this down people's throats. You have these gifts. It would be irresponsible not to claim them. Oh my God. So good. And you said something else that really is like a sweet spot for me right now. I don't know necessarily that it's writing related, but anything is, right?
Yeah.
You said that these people who are hearing you, you know, between their ears and surrounding their ears is a whole person, but a whole body. And I think the sweet spot for me right now is thinking about existing in a body, because we really just believe that we're the brain, I think.
Yep.
I did once create a panel for writers to discuss the physical body in writing, and I don't even know if I went to that panel, to be honest. Whoops. I like you, Earl. Earl is a fan, just so you know. I'm a fan of Earl. And I think that that's a really, it's just, so in my thinking about it, in my designing of that panel, it was like, you know, I was thinking about disability, and I was thinking about gender and what it means to be in a body that has functions or limits. And the act of reading and writing, which is a physical act, it's something that mostly happens between the ears. But you have to be in a position. I know this started out as holding a book, and then it turned into
interpretive dance.
Yeah. You know, if the physical body is necessary for it, and it is, then there are both limits and expectations and functions of the body. Not at all what I asked you here for, but something I'm excited to think about in general.
Yeah.
Which also is totally relevant to giving speeches and sermons, because I mean, you're standing right now.
I am. My natural habitat.
I was like, I think you're standing. Which
I have excellent posture. It's
I am in a chair.
A hand chair, it looks like.
It is, yeah. I got it when I was 13, and I love it so much. And to save up my allowance for it.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, that's a hugely physical thing. Surely there are pastors who cannot stand. I mean, that's a given. Surely there are pastors who cannot hear or see. And we know, you know, like FDR was in a wheelchair. So there's a speech giver. And there are just widely varying people who talk. Yeah. Great, just really great closing statement for us today. So on that, thank you for leading me down many rabbit holes that I'm going to be really excited to hyper focus on for a while. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your beautiful, beautiful insight. Now is the time where I give updates on the Midwest Writing Center. And here they are. Let's see. This Saturday, we're returning to Writer's Studio. So that is on Zoom, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Time. That's our workshop group. We do it twice a month. Thanks, Earl. Earl says, great job.
I think I know Earl. Unless Earl's a friend of yours, I'm pretty sure I know who Earl is.
I don't know anyone named Earl, but I am
okay. Then that's my Earl.
Excited to get to know this Earl. So we've got our regular workshop group. It is a really positive space. Maybe that grosses you out that I'm saying so, but it is. We try to really workshop in such a way that people are getting the feedback they need and not getting unduly put into boxes of other people's taste. So 11 to 1, the way to join that meeting is to join the Facebook group, click on the Zoom link, or email me to be put on a reminder list. Putting my email now in the, oh my God, I've gotten so good at this. Last time I tried to type my email while talking, I couldn't do it. Email me if you want to be put on the reminder list and get that Zoom link sent to your inbox. other things that are coming up, we have this really wonderful workshop for women and femmes led by Tanea Winder, who is a poet, an author, a public speaker, a motivational speaker. And she will be, it's a generative workshop called the Heartwork of Writing, in which we're gonna dig down into the seeds of our, creativeness, and come out with something better. I'll put the link to that since I have it easily accessible in the chat as well. It's going to be really, really wonderful. I feel so lucky that we were able to snag Tanea Winder for a workshop. It's also not an expensive workshop. It's 6 weeks, once a week on Wednesdays, $90 for members, 124 non-members. We will be having, and these are going to debut in the next couple of days on our website, so look out for them, a flash fiction workshop and a literary translation workshop. So those are going to be really, really cool. Coming up, we have a reading with the Moline Public Library that again is going to be on Zoom. February 15th at 6:30 p.m. That'll be an event for our new anthology, These Interesting Times, and I will be there so you can see me, which is always a highlight for everyone I know. It's also going to be featuring Joe Chambers, Shishwan Collins, Amy Penn, other people. I'm one of them. I haven't heard back from everyone yet, so I had to stop there. Lots and lots of wonderful things coming up. We've got Iron Pen, which is our 24-hour writing contest. That'll be, I think, the third weekend. I didn't bring my calendar in here with me. The third weekend of February. We get you get a prompt at 5 p.m. on Friday night, and your piece of writing is due 5 p.m. Saturday night. That includes fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. It's $10 to enter. Winners receive opportunity for publication. And we have a reading where anyone who participates is welcome to read, but of course, also we're going to highlight those winners. And anyone who participates is entered to win free tuition to the Collins Writers Conference, which happens the final week of June. Actually, I think the 4th week of June. I think this June has 5 weeks. Lots to look forward to. Yes. So thank you, Emily, for listening to that. You're welcome to join all of these things, by the way. I'm genuinely looking forward to all of them. That's the best part of this job, is that like I don't fake enthusiasm for anything. I don't think that I could be the face of an org and be disingenuous, but people don't know that about me. Maybe they think this is just what I do. So on that, we have taken the full hour. So I'm going to actually, did you have a prompt in mind? I didn't ask you.
I mean, I thought of one since we started talking.
Let's do it.
If that's okay.
So the parameters,
all right, great.
Hold on. The parameters for you writing along at home. Set yourself a 5-minute timer. You're allowed to, although I guess I don't know what the prompt is, but I always want to leave the option to journal if it's not coming out the way you want it to. Take it away, Emily.
Yeah, so I was thinking for the prompt, we talked a lot about empathy today. And I think, first of all, I think it's always important to write from your scars, now your open wounds. So first, let's take that into consideration first. But I want you to think of a time in your life where you felt a deep emotion of some sort, like a big feeling, whether that's anger or joy, grief, loss, sorrow, epiphany, whatever it's been. And I want you to try to figure out a way to tell someone who's never experienced that what it physically felt like.
Physically, love that.
Yeah, metaphors are great for this.
That's wonderful. So to restate, think about a time when you felt a really intense feeling and try to explain it to someone else. That's really wonderful. Thank you so much, Emily. And thank you for being here, and thank you for being so engaging, and thank you for blowing my mind all over the place. I'm
I have to go clean it up now.
I don't I mean, I have lots of really amazing guests on here, but I don't often get vulnerable or gobsmacked. So I'm really, really grateful for that. Thank you so much. To everyone out there hanging out with us, please write more light into your life.